If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com.
Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. This is the Roger Stone Show, and I am your genial host, Roger Stone, on this beautiful day. Terrific sermon this morning at the Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church. Yes, I'm a proud Roman Catholic, but the local Catholic Church is a bit too woke for me. And back during the time that I was on trial, a woman there spit on my wife and I. When the Monsignor would do nothing about it, I decided to go to a friendlier church. I really believe whether you're a Presbyterian or an Episcopal or a Catholic or doesn't matter what denomination you are, if you're a Christian, your belief in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and your belief in God is what's important. We're going to talk a lot about God and his justice today because we're going to talk about the case of Michael McMahon. He was a New York City police officer, a hero cop, who was framed by the Justice Department of Joe Biden a little later in the program. In the meanwhile, I want to thank the folks at Apple because they have done it yet again. I have long had an Apple phone, but even prior to the most recent update, suddenly, for reasons that I cannot explain, and either can Apple customer service, people I have had saved in my contacts literally for a decade suddenly started disappearing. Now, it's not as bad as it could be, meaning if you can think of some key word in your last exchange with this individual, you might, through a search, be able to find the thread that still exists with their phone number. But literally, people I've been in touch with for decades who I've had saved, some of them not replaceable, have disappeared from my cell phone. Beyond that, the word update means to F up something that worked perfectly before. So now things that took previously one click take three, like saving photographs, for example. Apple seems to be moving backwards. I'm a technological Luddite to begin with. Fortunately, I have a group of talented young people who work with me. But thanks again, Apple. You have made my life harder and less effective as I try to deal with your disastrous new update. I did have the honor of joining the Larry Kudlow show on Saturday. Larry Kudlow, to me, probably the single smartest guy in the country when it comes to the economy. He is the apostle of economic growth and job creation. He is an avatar for low taxes and less regulation. And he and I are both veterans of the Reagan Revolution. It's interesting, in 1970, we were both working on U.S. Senate races in our native state of Connecticut. He was working for the Reverend Joe Duffy, who was the head of the ADA and who upset the Democrat Party running on an anti-Vietnam War platform. Well, I was working for State Senator John Lupton from Weston, Connecticut, who was challenging Lowell Weicker, the congressman from the 4th District of Connecticut. Both Larry's candidate and mine lost, and Lowell Weicker actually won that race in a three-way race in which Duffy had to split the Democrat vote with incumbent Thomas J. Dodd. Dodd had been censured by the U.S. Senate, then ran as an independent. He is, of course, the father of later Senator Chris Dodd. Tom Dodd, kind of an anachronism, an anti-communist Democrat who had been a prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials, but was one of the earliest advocates for gun control in the U.S. Senate. One of the best books I've ever read, if you like politics, is entitled The Senator from Central Casting, which is a biography of Tom Dodd. In any event, Larry Kudlow made an excellent point Saturday talking about the Democrat-caused government shutdown. It was his observation, which I completely agree with. that in fact the shutdown had nothing to do with health care funding for American citizens or illegal immigrants. It really had to do with the Democrats' effort to stymie the pro-growth agenda of Donald Trump. And Larry Kudlow correctly pointed out the continuing resolution that was ultimately passed when 7 Democrats folded on Chuck Schumer on the Schumer shutdown and decided to vote to open the government will end through January, and only fully funds 3 of the 12 appropriations for fiscal 2026, those being agriculture, military construction, and Veterans Affairs, and the legislative branch through the end of September. So the Democrats' extortion plot, which failed in this case, could be tried yet again. And that is my concern, that they will continue to stymie Donald Trump's efforts for economic growth and affordability by constantly shutting down the government. This is why I think the president continues to argue correctly we need to do away with the filibuster. I notice when you're outside of the Beltway in Washington, D.C., most people's eyes glaze over when you discuss the filibuster. They don't really understand what it is, but to summarize it, it means that on the Senate floor it takes 60 votes, not 51, but 60, to end debate on any given nomination or provision or bill. There are a few exceptions, rather than 51. So unless you can muster 60 votes on the Senate floor, you can't move to pass anything. The president has come out in favor of ending the filibuster. I agree with him. If we don't do it now, the Democrats will do it when they take control, if they take control, although the Democrat Party is in some deep, deep trouble. Meanwhile, in order to distract from their government shutdown antics, the Democrats have yet again recycled the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Here we go again. Jeffrey Epstein's his emails released this most recent week don't tell us anything we didn't already know. In fact, most of these emails have already been in the public domain. The Democrats have released 2,000 emails, almost all of which were released previously by Republicans, although they cleverly redacted certain names to try to make it appear that there was something to hide. And the facts here remain the same. Donald Trump cut off Jeffrey Epstein in 2004, late 2004. This was prior to Epstein being exposed and charged with sex crimes in the state of Florida. Now, there's kind of no way around that, although what did come to light in this recent series of releases is the very close relationship that Steve Bannon, the former Trump strategist, had with Jeffrey Epstein. Most notable was, of course, the email in which, after the election of Donald Trump, essentially, Epstein says, no problem, to his cohorts, Bannon with me. Now, Steve Bannon has to explain what that means. People ask me, what's your beef with Steve Bannon? It's really very simple. He and I both testified for the House Intelligence Committee under oath. Both of our testimonies, I believe, were voluntary. In other words, I was not required to testify. I volunteered. And when Steve was asked point blank in the House Intelligence Committee by Adam Schiff if he had ever discussed WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, or the allegedly stolen emails with Roger Stone, he said, no, never. Adam Schiff followed up and said, pressing him, and Bannon said, no, on no occasion. Unfortunately, at my trial, when Bannon swept to the witness stand as a surprise witness for Robert Mueller, clad all in black, kind of like a heavy-set Johnny Cash, a lot of dandruff on his shoulders, wouldn't look me in the eye. But when asked the exact same question, he said, oh, yes, I discussed WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, and these allegedly stolen emails with Stone in every phone conversation in 2016. Now, Jonathan Turley, the eminent GW law professor, looked at the transcript of both of those hearings and realized that there was an extraordinary contradiction between both sworn testimonies. Interestingly, the New York Post is the only news outlet to report this. It remains unreported. The folks at Bare Knuckle Boxing Championships have offered me the chance to fight Steve Bannon at the Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida, and I have issued the challenge to Steve Bannon. I do hit the heavy bag about 3 times a week. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm a bit older than Steve, but I'm hoping that he will agree to this match and that we'll both agree that should we win, I think I would win, that I would give my winnings to White Coat Labs, a charity that fights for animal rights and against the torture of defenseless animals by the federal government. I'm waiting for Steve Bannon's answer. I won't hold my breath, however. Hunter Biden, one of the most vile individuals in the country, actually in an interview this week attacks Miranda Devine, who I believe is probably one of the most effective and best investigative journalists in America today. Hunter Biden says there's no ethics in what someone as horrendously ugly as Miranda Devine, physically and in terms of ethics, does. They're whores for money, and she does it because she makes money. And when she goes to sleep at night, I'm sure she sleeps just fine, but I don't know anybody that is going to be mourning her when she's gone. On the contrary, Hunter, Miranda Devine is one of the very best investigative journalists in the country today. You're just upset because she broke the stories for the New York Post that proved that your vile and horrendous laptop proceeds that had been made public were 100% accurate and genuine. She also, by the way, is extremely attractive and one of the nicest people I've ever met. She's a great author, a great investigative journal, but you, sir, are a cur for calling her names and particularly attacking her physical looks when, in fact, she's much better looking than many of the hookers that we saw you with in the laptop photos. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. When we come back, we're going to talk about how some slipped into the U.S. Senate a provision that does away with the proceeds and the benefits of the hemp industry here in the United States, something that Donald Trump himself signed into law in the 2019 Farm Bill, something that benefits people suffering from PTSD, depression, number of veterans. I think this is a horrific thing as a long-term advocate for the legalization and proper regulation of cannabis. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy. Download and subscribe at BeBullish.com. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. I became an advocate for medicinal marijuana almost 30 years ago when my father was suffering from cancer. And the cancer treatments deprived him of an appetite, and he was in horrific pain. I realized that the oral drugs the doctors were giving him made him even sicker and destroyed his quality of life. My sister and I decided to get him then illegal marijuana to smoke, which eased his pain and dealt with his lack of appetite. And I'm convinced it made his passing far more comfortable. Now the U.S. Senate has decided to solve a problem regarding hemp by bearing sweeping language for an unexpected power grab and a must-pass spending measure. The deal in the fiscal year 2026 agricultural FDA appropriations package effectively declares that hemp-derived cannabinoid product is limited to a total of 0.4 milligrams of total THC or any other cannabinoid with similar effect. And it defines hemp-derived cannabinoid product as any any intermediate or final product derived from hemp intended for human or animal use through any means of application or administration. Folks, this is not regulation. This is prohibition by the back door. The Senate is effectively blowing up an entire industry legalized by President Donald Trump in the 2019 Farm Bill by redefining hemp to include any cannabinoid with similar effects as THC, then capping every container at 0.4 milligrams or THC equivalents. They turn what was legal commerce into an existential threat virtually overnight. Yes, I agree with restricting non-naturally occurring cannabinoids like Delta-8, THC, and synthetic analogs, but that needs to be cleaned up not at the expense of an entire industry. Farmers, manufacturers, retailers, and yes, patients who have come to rely on hemp-derived relief from, say, gummies or topicals are all collateral damage. I saw a great video with Sean Ryan and Eddie Gallagher, two former Navy SEALs, talking about how they had both dealt with their PTSD through the use of THC. I wanted to play it today. Then I realized that more of it would have to be bleeped out because there were so many F-bombs. It wasn't really worth it at the end of the day. But their statement still makes the clear point. This is not some small plants and wins. This is an entire supply chain, state pilot programs, rural jobs, and massive agriculture investment. What we should have had instead is a clear statute, one that distinguishes between naturally occurring cannabinoids, engineered isomers, and licensed therapeutic preparations that set potency standards based on science, that preserves legitimate wellness uses, agricultural opportunity, and patient access while protecting the public from uncontrolled psychoactive products. We also should engage the USDA, the FDA, the DEA, and the state regulators in a transparent rulemaking process. My recommendation would be to pull the hemp section out of the spending bill. Congress should schedule hearings, invite farmers and manufacturers, calibrate potency and licensing, and pass a focused bill that addresses the challenge rather than trying to force President Trump into signing this funding bill in a one-size-fits-all manner. It may surprise somebody, but as a libertarian, I have long supported not just re-regulation of cannabis, but deregulation of cannabis, because its medicinal benefits have most definitely been proven. All right, you're listening to The Roger Stone Show. Coming up next, Sam Antar, one of the best fraud investigative reporters and journalists in the country today, is going to bring us up to date on the case of Letitia James, also the case of former FBI Director James Comey, both currently going on in the Eastern District of Virginia. There's a huge amount of disinformation in the Wall Street Journal about this, but then I don't get my news from the Wall Street Journal for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Wherever Bud goes, his harmonica goes with him. It's a pocket full of soul. Now he's living with prostate cancer. He asked his doctor about Xtandi and enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRESS, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
How do I do it all during the holidays? 4 words. Shipt Same Day Delivery. With Shipt, I can order groceries from Albertsons, decor from Michael's, even gifts for my furry friend from PetSmart. Plus, my personal shopper brings everything I need that same day. That makes it a breeze to decorate, get my shopping done, and make time for all the holiday parties. Do it all this holiday season with Shipt. Download the app or visit Shipt.com. That's SHIPT.com.
The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on the Roger Stone Show. So, the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, as well as former FBI Director James Comey, have both been charged with crimes in the Eastern District of Virginia. The Wall Street Journal yesterday wrote extensively about both cases, but specifically the James case. And they also covered the Comey case, but they failed to note that the previous U.S. attorney, who was essentially fired by President Donald Trump, I mean, technically he resigned, but he resigned ahead of being canned, failed to disclose to the court and the public that he had a stunning conflict of interest. He failed to disclose that his father-in-law, his wife's father, was the godfather to James Comey's daughter. That same individual, his father-in-law, had represented FBI Director James Comey as a private attorney. On that basis alone, Mr. Siebert, Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney, should have recused himself, but did not do so. Now, the Wall Street Journal also incorrectly reported that he was appointed to the U.S. Attorney's position by the two U.S. senators. He was appointed by Donald Trump based on the recommendation of the Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, but the two Democrat U.S. senators, different than virtually any other U.S. attorney in the country, both acquiesced at his appointment, and when he was not confirmed by the Senate, the federal judges in the Eastern District certified Eric Siebert as the U.S. attorney, which should have been a sign right there that he had a stunning conflict of interest and was a deep state operative. Now, Abbe Lowell, the Democrat criminals defense attorney of choice, is arguing that the indictment of Letitia James is without foundation. Letitia James, who has prosecuted people for the exact mortgage fraud crime that she herself currently stands accused of, claims that there is no evidence of that crime, or, pardon me, that's really not her defense. Her defense is, it's not a crime because Donald Trump doesn't like me. Joining me now to help break this down, probably one of the best fraud investigators in the country, Sam Antar. He's a former certified public accountant whose own career trajectory took a remarkable turn. He went from being a perpetrator of crime. He was the mastermind of the Crazy Eddie fiasco. Remember, Crazy Eddie was a major consumer electronics chain in the northeastern United States in the 1980s. He was a key figure in one of the decade's largest security fraud schemes, but he played his debt to society, and upon his rehabilitation, he has redirected his expertise towards forensic accounting, leveraging his firsthand knowledge of financial fraud to help combat white-collar fraud among both corporations and politicians. His unique perspective and his technical expertise have made him the expert. You can follow his reporting at whitecollarfraud.com. Sam Antar, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you for having me on, Roger.
You obviously saw this Wall Street Journal piece yesterday. As I said earlier, I don't get my news from the Wall Street Journal, a once great publication, but for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. Once in a while you get a decent editorial out of them, but their news reporting is really not reporting. It's distortionism and propaganda by and large. But let's kind of review the case against Letitia James, because the Wall Street Journal continues to insist that there is no case and that Bill Pulte, who is the head of the Federal Housing Finance Administration, who made the criminal referral based on publicly available documents that anyone with a computer and half a brain can find, that there is no case. So is there a case here, Sam?
Yes, there's absolutely a case. And let me just add that Letitia James' lawyer, Abbe Lowell, is looking to dismiss the case, claiming that prosecutors found insufficient evidence, specifically Eric Siebert, the former U.S. attorney in Virginia. Also, 4 amicus briefs supporting Abbe Lowell and his client Letitia James were filed saying exactly the same thing. They found insufficient evidence. Well, let's go back. I started looking into this in February. I found financial disclosures on her financial statements to New York that didn't match property records. There were 2 mortgages on her financial statements that weren't in the property records, and it caused the property to be leveraged at almost 2 times the value of her stated value of the property. What I also found was a second mortgage that she bought the house as a second home, whereas on her financial disclosures to New York State, it was an investment property. And I can go on and on and on. She bought a property in Virginia, another property in Virginia where she claimed that she was going to be a principal resident. She was never the principal resident. Joe Lewis and I have gone through all of her Brooklyn property, 10 falsified mortgage over a period of 20 years. Joe Lewis also pointed out that about 40 years ago, she bought a house with her father, but when she did the mortgage, it was husband and wife. Now, all of that information has been available to Eric Siebert and more. In other words, he's had access to the mortgages. He has access to the bank documents. Joe Lewis and I, we provided it in black and white, as clear as day. We linked to every document. We didn't make anything up. It's all there. Now, how is that insufficient evidence? You tell me.
Yeah, looking at the documents here, the property in Norfolk, Virginia, which is in the Eastern District of Virginia, this is a matter of public record on Perone Avenue. Her 2023 New York State disclosure required by law lists a freedom mortgage of between $150,000 and $250,000, a national mortgage of between $100,000 and $150,000 mortgage, a property value of between $100,000 and $150,000. So that would be an up to 400% mathematically impossible, an LTV. But the February 2025 title search shows the freedom mortgage does not exist. The national mortgage does not exist, but there is a mortgage for something called OVM Financial for $109,600, real but never disclosed to the state of New York as required by law. So 5 years she has phantom lenders who are disclosed while the real lender is hidden. If this were Donald Trump, he'd be charged immediately, but Abby Lowell, formerly the attorney for Hunter Biden, insists that there's insufficient use. Also, as you point out, Sam, Schedule E of her disclosures shows that she declared 0 personal use days at the Virginia property, which directly contradicts her sworn New York claim that the property in Virginia was her second home. So a second home with no personal use, 2 sworn filings, same property, totally contradictory, but the U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert seems to have ignored this.
Yes, and all of this information, Roger, okay, from the first time you brought me on the show, which is probably around February, from the first time you brought me on the show, from the first time I wrote about it, and then joined by Joe Lewis with his own independent investigation.
Joe Gilbert.
Every single document was made available to the feds. Plus, the FBI had subpoena power. In other words, they can interview witnesses, and ultimately they did find that she falsified her insurance policies on one of her properties, claiming that it was a primary residence when she bought it as a second home. Another fraud. All of this information was available to Siebert. It's not a big secret. It's public records. It's in the public domain. And for him to claim, or for them to claim that he said that there was insufficient evidence is basically cowardice on his part. It's experience without cowardice is credentialed. Experience without courage is credentialed cowardice. That's what it is. Okay. He did not do his job, and he left this mess to Lindsay Halligan to do. And to her credit, she brought charges against him, and there will be superseding indictments against Letitia James. That's what's going to happen.
Most legal experts tell me that when you have a crime such as mortgage fraud and bank fraud, there's almost always downstream additional crimes such as tax evasion and insurance fraud. As you point out in your most recent article, there's also a second property in Norfolk, Virginia, bought in August of 2023 at a price of $250,000, roughly $240,000, with a mortgage of $219,000. That's 91% of the value. But the real kicker is, in August 2nd of 2023, James tells the lender, a company called Sterling, that is not her primary residence, and that loan application was rejected. Then 15 days later, she signs a sworn declaration. This is not a check-the-box form, but a drafted declaration that says Sterling will be her principal residence, and then the loan is approved. The truth is, she never lived there a single day. She never disclosed the property between 2023 and 24 as required by law. She never disclosed the mortgage between 23 and 24, which is required by law. Her "it was a mistake" excuse came later only when she was caught red-handed. And that mistake seems to me to have saved her over $100,000. This is intentional occupancy fraud in writing. But the U.S. Attorney, Eric Siebert, because I guess she's a liberal Democrat, he decided just to look the other way. Incredible.
Incredible. Like, let's take downstream, okay? The feds had access to her income tax returns, right? They subpoenaed them. They got them. Because how do we know that? Because there are references to her income tax returns on the indictment. I didn't have access to it, okay? And the income tax returns proved the case. She said that she never had a personal day on a property that she bought as her second home. And in order to get a second home mortgage, you have to occupy the property at least 183 days a year. She did not occupy the property. The feds also had access to her insurance policies, where it claimed that she was going to be the primary occupier of that property. But it turns out that she never set foot in the property. So here is what's going on. The evidence is there. The evidence is in black and white. The evidence doesn't lie, but Eric Siebert did lie. And this is what the problem is. Okay, they're talking about political motivation. They're talking about all of this political motivation hinges on the fact that Eric Siebert didn't think there was enough evidence to bring a case. I am telling you that's BS. Eric Siebert had more than enough evidence to bring a case. He just chose not to. That is what the situation is. The press just takes innuendo and amplifies falsehoods, but that's not going to change the facts on the ground. Since 1982 to today, she has falsified at least 13 mortgages that we know of. She's falsified at least 6 financial statements to New York State. She's falsified a multitude of insurance policies. She's falsified a multitude of income tax returns. If that's not fraud, I don't know what is.
Yeah, this is not Trump. It's not Lindsay Halligan, the very capable woman who's denigrated by the Wall Street Journal as a quote-unquote insurance lawyer, ignoring the fact that she was a senior partner and head of the civil litigation department of a major law firm. They denigrate her also because she's quite attractive, as well as being a very sharp lawyer. It's funny because in my trial, I was specifically prohibited from the judge from pointing out that every one of the prosecutors in my case had worked for Hillary Clinton, and that I had written The Clintons' War on Women in 2015, the definitive book outlining all the heinous crimes of Bill and Hillary Clinton. But I was not allowed to argue that I was either being selectively prosecuted or that the prosecution of me was based on political motives. Will the judge in Letitia James' case prohibit her from raising those arguments? Or better yet, will they prohibit the attorneys for FBI Director James Comey from arguing those defenses? Somehow, I really doubt it. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening.
He already has permitted, Roger, I don't mean to interrupt you, but he already has permitted them to make those arguments. First of all, there's motions to dismiss based on those arguments, and there's amicus briefs supporting the defendants in those cases. He allowed those amicus briefs to be entered into the record. There are two standards of justice in this country.
All right, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We'll be right back with Sam Antar. You can check his stuff out at whitecollarfraud.com, whitecollarfraud.com. He brings the receipts. Check it out, folks. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Every leap in American history has needed breakthrough energy.
Ignition, liftoff.
Now, AI is here, and Chevron is working to power it. We're aiming to develop multi-gigawatt power plants near data centers, designed with future pathways to lower carbon intensity. AI gets the power it needs, communities get the jobs, and the grid stays strong. Powering AI today builds America's next superpower.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du Norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. Coming up next on the Roger Stone Show, New York City police officer and hero cop Michael McMahon, God thankfully pardoned by President Donald Trump, framed by the Biden administration, and his wife, actress Martha Byrne, will join us right here on the Roger Stone Show. If you don't believe in God, you will after this interview, because it's through the grace of God that justice was served in Michael McMahon's case. But we're going to continue now with our interview with Sam Antar. Sam Antar is the editor and publisher of whitecollarfraud.com. He has been on the cutting edge of proving the massive fraud by New York State Attorney General Letitia James. If you watch the mind-numbing interview between Attorney General Letitia James and Joy Reid, an interviewer who, if her IQ was 1 point lower, you'd have to water her like a plant. Letitia James said that mortgage fraud is a very, very rare crime, that it is almost never prosecuted. The problem with that, of course, is that she herself has prosecuted numerous people for this crime in her role as New York Attorney General. And secondly, she prosecuted Donald Trump under a law in which no one has ever been prosecuted, claiming falsely that he had inflated the value of his assets in order to secure construction loans, real estate development loans, all of which were paid back in full, earning the lenders $40 million in interest. Talk about rare crimes. So this continuing theme here of no one is above the law, that she said over and over, mind-numbingly, now she seems to believe, Sam, that she is above law. What say you?
Well, I would rather focus right now on Eric Siebert. We all know what she said. Eric Siebert should be called in front of Congress. He should put his hand on the Bible and explain why there was insufficient evidence to prosecute Letitia James. This is either judicial malpractice or this is obstruction of justice. Either way, he has to be called to account, because all of this opposition to this case is based upon him claiming that there was insufficient evidence, where there was overwhelming evidence against Letitia James. That's what must be done. They can call Lindsay Halligan a beauty queen. They can call her an insurance lawyer. But she got right with all of these experts filing amicus briefs from former judges, from former prosecutors, from Hakeem Jeffries and Charles Schumer, of all people, right? She got right with every single person got wrong, and she deserves credit for it. That for standing up to the mob. And this is what is going on today. We have to get to the bottom of why the Justice Department is not serving the interests of the American people. That is the main problem. There seems to be two Justice Departments. One serving the interests of the American people, and one, you want to call it the deep state or the entrenched state or whatever the hell you want to call it, that are working at odds with bringing people to justice. That has to stop.
This is, of course, the same jurisdiction in which former FBI Director James Comey has been charged with lying to Congress. Now, once again, rather than confront the specifics of that, his own notes that were released by Lindsay Halligan in one of her filings prove that he lied about knowing that there was a Clinton plan to smear Donald Trump as a Russian intelligence asset and claim that there was Russian interference aiding his election. So instead, they argue not against the evidence, but they argue about the legality of President Donald Trump's authority to appoint Lindsay Halligan as the interim U.S. attorney, which he most definitely has under the Vacancies Act. I want to thank our guest, Sam Antar, who has plotted out very carefully all the documentation of everything he said today. Can be found at whitecollarfraud.com. It is must reading for those who want to see how big and powerful politicians cheat, unlike average citizens who would be held responsible. This is The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists like Olu Sheyi are working to build the best sports viewing experience.
Some of my favorite moments throughout my life are watching sports with my dad. Now I work at Comcast as part of the team that created our AI highlights technology, which uses AI to detect the major plays in a sports game.
And now, millions of sports fans will never miss a moment. Visit ComcastCorporation.com/sports to learn more.
The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. Now I want to talk about the case of Michael McMahon. Michael McMahon is a retired New York police officer, a sergeant and detective whose career spanned almost 2 decades of service in one of the nation's most demanding law enforcement environments. Michael McMahon is just not a decorated police officer, but he's a hero cop, a veteran of the 9/11 attacks and the emergency and recovery period afterwards. But he was unjustly and unfairly framed by the Biden Justice Department while working as a fully licensed private detective, essentially based on everything I have seen, because he stumbled on an enormous communist Chinese spy operation inside the United States. His wife, Martha Byrne, who appeared here in the Stone Zone on my weekday show, but also here on the Roger Stone Show to appeal for justice in his case, is an Emmy Award-winning actress, but more importantly, she is a wife and mother of three. She was an extraordinarily effective advocate, reminding me of my own wife, because I've been down this road. Until you have been targeted by a vengeful and politically motivated Justice Department with both unlimited resources and no regard whatsoever for the facts, the truth, or the law, well, you really can't understand it. Michael McMahon was pardoned, got a full and unconditional pardon from President Donald Trump. I think it was 2 or perhaps 3 Fridays ago. I want to particularly credit Congressman Michael Lawler for his unyielding effort to persuade the president that was the right course of action. Michael McMahon and his wife, Martha Byrne, join us now. Welcome.
Hey, Roger. Thanks so much.
Hey, Roger, you're the best. Thank you. This is much better news, right? Good news. Thank you for your support, too, and everything that you've done to get the story out there. Thank you so much.
I'm proud to have written about your case. I wouldn't even know about it, but for our mutual friend, Allison Guerrero, who's a great American patriot and a particularly good friend of mine. But also, I think the definitive piece on this, much better than the stuff that I wrote, piece by Colonel John Mills, who recently joined the Trump administration, him way back in April of 2025. But, Mike, I'm going to go to you first. Explain to my listeners, because I saw people on social media whining about your pardon. Explain to people, in your own words, if you would, exactly what happened here.
So I was a licensed private investigator after I retired from the NYPD. I did a routine surveillance case, private investigative case. I did some background checks for four and a half days. I worked with 2 retired detectives, NYPD. I told 2 federal agents about this surveillance and background checks, and that was it. Nothing extraordinary happened. It was very little money. I would say, a few $1,000s total. Then 4 years later, I get a knock on my door. My house is surrounded by FBI agents. And I'm like, what's going on? And they said, you are under arrest for working with China. And I said, what in the world are you talking about? So they said, let's go in the car. We'll go down. We'll talk about it. So they charged me with the Foreign Registration Act, failure to register as a foreign agent. So you have to register as a foreign agent if you know you're working for a foreign country. I had no idea I was working for a foreign country. I thought I was working for a normal Chinese guy out of Queens, New York. I got paid with a business check out of a company at a Queens, New York. And, they thought I should have registered as a foreign agent, but I didn't know what FARA was. Never heard of FARA. Didn't know anything about registering as a foreign agent if you worked for a foreign country. And they charged me with stalking. So there's no federal statute for stalking. They have to use interstate stalking. Interstate stalking is a federal statute going from state to state to state. I never left the state of New Jersey. They somehow convinced the jury that I was traveling. I was getting phone calls from different states into New Jersey, therefore causing me to be charged with interstate stalking, which is the felony.
So, as I understand it, you were hired to locate a person named Jin Yu and his wife, Fang Lu, in New Jersey, yes, who had allegedly stolen millions of dollars from a Chinese-based construction company.
Correct.
And those funds turned out to be embezzled, but as we now learn, both of these Chinese nationals were in the United States illegally, that they had lied on their applications for green cards. It seems to me your real crime here appears to me that you bumped into a Chinese intelligence operation called, Operation Fox Hunt, and that's what the Biden Justice Department really wanted to cover up.
Yes. Unbeknownst to me, this whole operation was going on. Not involving me, but the government says it was involving me. There was no evidence of it. There was no emails, text messages that I was working for a foreign country. But the government, created this whole scheme, but they involved me. And to this day, I don't really know for sure why I was involved or why they arrested me. These agents, these FBI agents, never spoke to me, never brought me in, never brought the 2 detectives I worked with hand in hand every single day on this surveillance case. They never brought in the FBI agent who I told about this case and another federal agent who I told about this case. But they brought in the CCP agents who were here during this operation, who were working this operation. So they spoke to them, didn't speak to me or any U.S. law enforcement. That's what really, really gets me mad, that they chose the CCP over an American family. Unbelievable.
It is a chilling story, one that if you can read about. Martha Byrne, who is an Emmy-winning actress, you may recognize her from a number of extraordinarily popular soap operas, but she was a very, very effective advocate for you. She wrote a terrific book, which I highly recommend to folks as a cautionary tale. It's entitled In the Interest of Justice. You can get it on Amazon. I immediately sent for it, and I saw my own story in yours, in which you went into a rigged system in which the government denies you a fair defense, glosses over your right to due process, hides exculpatory information in this breakneck effort to destroy you, to cover up a larger narrative. In this case, that narrative, I think, would be communist Chinese intelligence infiltration here in the United States. Martha, I know your faith played a great role and sustained you in this horrific ordeal, but tell folks what it was like, because my wife has experienced it.
It's hell. That's the only way to talk about it. It's, you know, when your husband, who's a hero, who served his entire life to service this country for strangers, I mean, took bullets for strangers, to be called a traitor of the country on the global stage by the DOJ and the media, and then the press is outside your home and your children have to go to school and he's done nothing wrong, is first of all, I feel it's criminal. I feel that when you know a man is innocent and you've framed him for a crime he didn't commit, and now you're colluding with not only the interior members of the Justice Department and the FBI, and then you're having the media put that out into the world, it is horrific. So on October 28, 2020, when he was arrested, we had to look at all the evidence. We looked at everything, and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. So, Roger, you know this. Like, as soon as you decide you're going to fight back, that's when they really go after you. They hide evidence. They encrypted evidence. We couldn't open our own evidence. The evidence was suppressed at trial. The alleged victims who were CCP, lied on the stand, perjured themselves, worked with, obviously, the prosecution to put this fake story together, and could not identify my husband in court, Roger. How could he be charged with interstate stalking when the alleged victims couldn't even identify him? We couldn't talk about his NYPD career. We couldn't talk about his good works. We could not. There was so much we were not allowed to put in. Even a civil lawsuit against the alleged victims for $30 million, which there was a judgment on them in the United States. We could not bring that up. So I really encourage people to read my book, because you wouldn't believe it unless you see the evidence that this is how they suppress evidence and how they get people to be found guilty. It's horrific. And to be called these horrible names and have to fight back. And then finally, thanks to you and to Michael Lawler and, of course, President Trump, who was clearly briefed on the case and saw this grave injustice, to recognize his innocence is just humbling. I can't even put it into words.
Yeah, it is an enormous feeling of relief. It's kind of like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It really feels good when you stop. It is a horrific experience, because unfortunately, as I learned in the District of Columbia, in these politically charged cases, the Constitution doesn't matter, due process doesn't matter, the facts don't matter, the evidence doesn't matter, the proof doesn't matter. In fact, in my case, I was prohibited from raising many of the same defenses that Letitia James is now raising in her case, for example, when I'm put on trial for mortgage fraud and bank fraud, or the defenses that former FBI Director James Comey is raising. This is all politically motivated. But in this case, it appears to me what the government was interested in hiding was that there is a massive operation going on inside the United States, where they have their own police stations, where Chinese special operators who have snuck across the southern border to have their own secret repatriation efforts of Chinese intelligence. I'm kind of interested, Mike, what happened to the two Chinese nationals here who both lied to get into the country and evidently embezzled millions of dollars in doing so?
Well, right after my sentence, the civil lawsuit was thrown out. The prosecutors in the Eastern District of New York traveled to New Jersey and assisted the CCP members with their civil lawsuit, and lo and behold, it was thrown out after my conviction. So, this is unbelievable. You don't think it's true, but they were assisting these people with their civil lawsuit, their immigration, their asylum.
And Roger, we knew that because there was evidence put up at trial that we couldn't share with the jury, that there were thank you notes from FBI agent in Red Bank, New Jersey, assisting them with their immigration and a civil lawsuit. So the fact that these people have been here in this country illegally since 2010, have committed multiple crimes here in the United States and found guilty in China in 2021. And the fact that our government protected them and somehow spun it that they were the victims in this case and not my family, that's a case study that everybody should learn about. And that nobody from the media covered the fact that this guy was CCP from Wuhan, who was like the mayor of Wuhan, on the stand in my husband's trial, and not one person in the media covered that story. I looked around like, where is the media? Right? Nobody wants to talk to this guy. Nobody wants to ask him any questions. I mean, how is he, first of all, still here in this country? But I'd like to know if he's still, what other favors did he get for testifying that day? Did he get any favors, other than what we obviously see? There was a part where the judge asked the prosecutor, what's their status, or are they here because of the trial? And the prosecutor said they've been told they could stay here until at least the trial was over. What are you talking about? What does that sound like to you, Roger?
All right. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. God bless you. Congratulations on your pardon. Thank you to Congressman. Great thanks to Congressman Michael Lawler, but above all, thank you to President Donald Trump for serving justice in the case for this great American hero, Michael McMahon, and his indefatigable wife, who was a fighter for justice. Thanks for joining us today.
God bless you, Roger.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I'm William Googe, a Vuori collaborator and professional ultra runner from the UK. I love to tackle endurance runs around the world, including a 55-day, 3,064-mile run across the US. So I know a thing or two about performance wear. When it comes to relaxing, I look for something ultra versatile and comfy. The Ponto Performance Jogger from Vuori is perfect for all of those things. It's the comfiest jogger I've ever worn. And the DreamKnit fabric is why I'll always reach for them over other joggers. Check them out in the DreamKnit collection by going to vuori.com/William. That's VUORI.com/William, where new customers can receive 20% off their first order. Plus, enjoy free shipping in the US on orders over $75 and free returns. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions.
We all love a legendary comeback, and Degree Original Cool Rush is back and better than ever. Cool Rush isn't just a scent, it's a movement, a fan favorite that delivers bold, fresh vibes and all-day sweat protection. Whether you're heading to the gym, the office, or just trying to stay fresh on a long day, Cool Rush has your back. So if you haven't tried it yet, head to your local Walmart or Target and grab Degree Cool Rush, the fan favorite scent from the world's #1 antiperspirant brand.
The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is Dion Cini. He's a New York City resident. He's been coined in the media multiple times as a professional provocateur, mainly for his efforts to drop huge Trump flags in locations where Trump flags don't normally belong. So Dion was banned at all Disney parks, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, and of course all Major League Baseball stadiums, where he has dropped as many as 17 huge Trump flags over the course of 4 years. Dion Cini created a movement known as Operation Flag Drop to encourage other people to utilize the same strategy to express their First Amendment rights, which ultimately led to thousands of grassroots flag waves, car and boat rallies. In his spare time, Dion Cini designs and manufactures Trump flags and other MAGA products, which help other Trump supporters provide effective messaging when they're in the political battlefield. Dion Cini has been a good and loyal friend of mine, and he wanted to come on today to talk about his views on the recent New York mayoral race. In his real life, he's a software developer for financial and medical applications. He's a great patriot, a great friend, a great Italian-American, and he joins us now. Dion.
Roger, thank you for having me on, buddy. Still my #1 hero. You've actually been on par more than Trump lately, so very honored to be here.
All right, so you had some views on the recent New York City mayor's race. We talked about that race ad nauseum here on the Roger Stone Show. We're still sifting through the results, trying to analyze exactly what it means. I think I know what Mayor-elect Mamdani's policies mean for New York City, but give us your unorthodox take.
I mean, and I don't want to beat the dead horse that I know you guys have been doing for the last couple weeks here. So I'm going to try to also put a positive spin on it and see how we can sort of avoid what I call a mayoral jihad, from coast to coast, because that is what is going to happen. Okay, it's not a theory, it's a fact. So, but what I've been doing, I really wanted to back up a little bit and talk about what I've been doing and what, the grassroots movement thing has been doing too, because we need to talk about that as well real quickly. Because I've kind of taken a break here for the last 6 months, but, the other day, our new mayor said to Trump, because we got to pump up the volume. So that got me really excited. And that was actually, I'm really excited about it right now, because when somebody says pump up the volume, it's reminiscent of the time when President Trump told me to not, keep going, don't stop what you're doing. I love the Trump flags, after he saw the first one at Yankee Stadium, he fell in love. So, okay, let's pump up the volume. So I'm going to sort of ramp it up here with this new movement that I'm working on called Trump for King. I know it's a radical idea, but, we're going up against radicals. So I was kind of fighting fire with fire.
Dion, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will feature my friend Dion Cini and let him continue his political analysis. Dion, don't go away. And don't you go away. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back. We're talking to Dion Cini, who is a New Yorker, a professional provocateur, a Trump supporter, and a good friend of mine. Dion, you were giving us your take on the recent mayoral elections when we had to go to a commercial break. Folks, don't go away, because Joel Gilbert, reporting for the Gateway Pundit, is going to join us to talk about the newly surfaced charges of mortgage fraud by Congressman Eric Swalwell, one of Donald Trump's harshest critics. You remember him. He's the one who got caught having an affair with a communist Chinese spy while on the House Intelligence Committee, where he had full access to classified U.S. information. Dion, you have the floor. Did we lose Dion Cini?
Sorry about that. I'm here. Sorry about that. I'm here.
All right. Dion, you have the floor.
All right. So really just want to talk about, real briefly, to revisit again, is that we lost this election the moment Curtis got into, he put his name on the ballot, it was a perfect setup for the Democrats and the socialists. It's sort of the Sun Tzu art of war, to divide and conquer. But it was us that actually did the dividing, with Curtis, Scott, and a few dozen Staten Islanders who took Curtis from 20% to 15% and then ultimately 7% in the election. Now, we probably couldn't have got those Curtis 100,000 or 120,000 votes, but what we could have gotten, we could have changed the full dynamics of the election had he not get into the race. So instead of Republican versus Democrat, versus socialist versus independent, it would have just simply been good versus not as good, or evil versus not as evil. Sort of thing. So we didn't really have that opportunity to really, fight in that type of position where we should have done in the first place. So, and that's, of course, Roger, what we talked before about this great demographic shift that's happened in New York City and London. London was actually talking the other day that they're at only 38% Londoners, and that's why they're having their jihad across, the UK and especially London. But the same exact thing kind of is happening here, not so much, which is Muslim population, but immigrants, transients and people. New York City is now only 40% New Yorkers. So every time somebody went on the radio and said, New Yorkers, you got to get out there and vote, they weren't talking to New Yorkers, they weren't talking to the majority. So that actually became a really, really big problem. So
Dion, are you arguing just a question, are you arguing that the second largest party in the state, indeed the leading party in the country, the great New York State Republican Party, should have nominated no one?
No one, absolutely no one. No, because of the demographic shift. In fact, if they did nominate somebody, or let's say, I always thought Greg Kelly would have been absolutely perfect to do the job. But the more Republican the person would have been, the more the person would have lost. Curtis only got 7% because it was just ridiculous to put him in there. But if you put somebody in there who was a real diehard Republican, you put Stefanik in there for mayor, she probably wouldn't have gotten above 20% or just at the 17%. So it really wouldn't have mattered anyway if she could only get 20%, needing 33 minimum to run. So the more Republican they would have put on the card, the greater the chance they would have lost. And that doesn't include Curtis because he's not a Republican.
We don't endorse candidates here on the Roger Stone Show or on my weekday show. I thought that Curtis waged a valiant effort. I watched those debates, and I guess my conclusion was that Andrew Cuomo demonstrated his superior understanding of government, that Mamdani demonstrated his superior understanding of politics. That's why I called him Mamdaji. While Curtis, I think, demonstrated his superior knowledge of New York. Now, you're right about the demographic change. Less than a third of New York City residents are Catholics in a city where Catholics once dominated. Less than a third of New Yorkers are white. Less than a Republican registration is at an all-time low. I thought it was 13%. It's actually 10%. There has been a very definite demographic change. Substantial change since Rudy Giuliani was elected mayor. In all honesty, I don't know how you could prevent somebody from seeking the Republican nomination. It has an opening petition process. It held a primary. Curtis Sliwa won that primary despite the opposition of some folks like yourself. I was happy to see my friend Frank Morano win the Staten Island City Council race. I think you'll be an excellent city council member. Dion, before I let you go, tell folks where they can go to get your incredible Trumpian products.
And of course, TrumpSwag.com or HugeFlags.com.
All right. I thank you for joining us. You are my friend, and I wanted you to have an opportunity to speak your piece, which I always value. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. And the last thing I want to say is I want to get more people out there to be more like Scott Presler. We need 1,000 Scott Preslers, or we are doomed.
I share your high regard for Scott Presler, and greater activism at the grassroots, as my good friend General Michael Flynn says, is the answer. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. All right. I want to bring on Joel Gilbert. Joel Gilbert is an investigative journalist and a documentary filmmaker. He very specifically is the guy who broke the story last week that Congressman Eric Swalwell of California now faces charges himself of mortgage fraud. Now, he's faced a barrage of controversy in recent years from his alleged extramarital affair with a communist Chinese spy named Fang Fang during the time that he was a member of the House Intelligence Committee and therefore capable of accessing classified information. Then there was his infamous on-air mishap in 2019 on Hardball, Chris Matthews, where I think he actually publicly, I don't know how you say it, broke wind. But now there's a new revelation that's raised even more serious questions about both his integrity and his eligibility to serve in Congress. Joel Gilbert, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Great to be back. Thank you, Roger.
So what happened here, Joel? Explain this to us.
Well, I've been pulling mortgage data from a number of politicians, including Letitia James, as you know, and it's all online. It's all public. So I looked in D.C., and sure enough, Eric Swalwell's mortgage was online. And when I downloaded, I was pretty shocked, well, not totally shocked, to see that he declared his Washington, D.C. home to be his principal residence. Now, there's a problem with that because he's supposed to be a principal resident of the state of California. Did a little more digging. It turns out he does not have any residence at all in the state of California, which puts him in violation of the U.S. Constitution, which requires Congress members to be inhabitants of their home state. And California Elections Code 349 goes even further. It requires congressmen to have a domicile and a habitation that's fixed. They can't have a P.O. box. They have to have a home. So he's either committing election fraud in California or he's committing mortgage fraud in D.C., and that opened up a whole nother can of worms for Eric Swalwell, because looking at his campaign disclosures since 2011, he's been in Congress. 2011, he owes $100,000 in student loans and over $100,000 in credit card debt. Flash forward 2024 campaign, nothing changed. He hasn't paid off his credit cards or his student loans in 12 years. So you got to ask, well, where in the world is his $174,000 salary going every year? And even the house that he bought in D.C. is kind of an average, kind of dumpy house, and he had to borrow $1.2 million for it. So I think there's a lot of red flags in this guy. His finances are a mess. The fact that he doesn't have a verifiable home in California, the fact that he claimed Washington, D.C. as his principal residence. Now, if you compare him to Maxine Waters, of all people, Maxine Waters owns a home in Los Angeles, and in her mortgage document I looked at, her house in Washington, D.C. is her second home. That's what it's supposed to be. It's actually listed as her second home. So Maxine Waters pays a little higher interest rates because of it's a second home. Swalwell's taking advantage, just like Letitia James did, to say, well, this is my principal residence so he can get lower interest rates. But it's dishonest, and I was happy to see that Swalwell was referred to the DOJ for an investigation.
Well, it was interesting. I saw him on TV yesterday basically saying, threatening those who are investigating him, saying, when we get the power back in the House, I hope that you're ready to be subpoenaed and explain why you investigated our wrongdoing. That's the only way I could read that. But couldn't you read that as obstruction of justice in his current case?
I think when you make threats against investigators of any type, you can add that right to the list of possible charges. I think he should be investigated for that. When you see Swalwell on TV today, another thing stands out for me. Congress people usually look good. He's unshaven. It's not a beard. It's not shaved. He kind of looks like this hobo. I don't know what he's trying to accomplish. He looks as though he knows he committed a crime and he's looking to, get himself, maybe not to be noticed. So he looks kind of strange. He acts strange. He's got all these strange controversies, and he needs to be investigated. You can't have a principal residence in Washington, no residence in your home state, and all these student loan debts. I mean, was he hoping that Biden was going to forgive his student loan debt? $100,000 in student loan debts. He's never paid them down. $100,000 in credit card debts. I can't figure out where all his money is going, but something's wrong with this guy.
Well, it's conceivable that he's taking style and fashion tips from Steve Bannon, because I can't understand why his aversion to soap and water. It's very, very strange. These are, I must say, trying times for those in the Make America Great movement. You have a number of controversies going on here. Kash Patel insists that the FBI has indeed correctly identified the murderer of Charlie Kirk. Incredible new documentary by my friend Tucker Carlson, which I think raises very serious questions about whether that is correct. Laura Loomer, another friend of mine, but attacking Tulsi Gabbard, which I objected to. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Georgia, attacking Donald Trump returning fire. The exposure of Steve Bannon as a close friend of both a political and business associate of Jeffrey Epstein. That surprised me even more. The president being forced to sign this bill that does away with the domestic hemp industry, which created thousands of jobs and I think created some medicinally beneficial products for people. But the House and Senate Republicans passing a bill which reopened the government, which the president was essentially required to sign in order to win that incredible victory, but doing away with that entire industry. I found that really, really troubling. So I'm reminded of the period in 1982 after President Ronald Reagan had cut taxes and had enacted his regulatory cuts, and the economy had not yet rallied, and many people were panicking. And wiser voices, Larry Kudlow among them, told us at the time that we needed to stay the course. I believe that's the best advice for this moment in American politics, that President Donald Trump has delivered the greatest single tax cuts in American history. He has extended them. That extension begins in this January. Due to his tariff policies, we're taking in not billions, but trillions of dollars from nations that were previously taking advantage of us. We have sealed our southern border. Thank God. We have undertaken the greatest mass deportation of dangerous illegal criminals in U.S. history. We are rebuilt our military strength. We are no longer letting men play in girls' sports. We've done away with the whole DEI agenda. I don't think the president's getting enough credit for his phenomenal accomplishments. Is he perfect? No, he's not perfect. No one said he's perfect. None among us is perfect. But it takes a long time to turn around an ocean liner. And America's decline was not going to be reversed in the less than a year that he has been president. So I am among those who believe that our greatest days still lie ahead, and I still believe that he will introduce a golden age of peace, prosperity, justice, security, and law and order. I want to thank my guest, Joel Gilbert, who writes often for the Gateway Pundit. He called the case of fraud against Eric Swalwell before anyone, and I want to stress that he did so with access to documents that anyone with a computer and half a brain can find. Joel, thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back for our final segment here on the Roger Stone Show. You know, after the 2020 election, I urged President Donald Trump to pardon preemptively every member of his staff, every Republican member of Congress who had questioned the outcome of the election, every one of his top surrogates, every major public supporter who had questioned that election, because I correctly forecast that the Biden Justice Department would deem it a crime to question the outcome of the 2020 election. Indeed, I still believe to this day that every American has a First Amendment right to do so. I point out that Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director of national intelligence, has a working group to examine the effectiveness and the reliability, as well as the integrity of electronic voting machines, and to examine the results of the 2020 election. But in my prediction, I was exactly right. Now, of course, the left-wing media said, Roger Stone was pushing for a second pardon because of his actions on January 6th. Let me be very clear. Any claim that I knew in advance about, partook in, or condoned any illegal action on January 6th are categorically false, and the FBI sources told that to Reuters back in April. So I foresaw Operation Arctic Frost. That was the illicit extra-constitutional effort by Special Counsel Jack Smith, where they sought to criminalize free speech. They sought to criminalize anyone questioning the fact that, for example, the counting stopped at 3 o'clock in the morning in 3 different states, and in many cases as many as 300,000 paper mail-in ballots that had never been folded and therefore never been mailed showed up and were added to the count. It was interesting to see roughly a week ago when President Donald Trump pardoned the alternative electors in Nevada, in Georgia, in Arizona, and in Wisconsin. Although some of them still remain charged with state charges and their federal pardon is ineffective, it is still, I think, highly symbolic that none of these people did anything wrong. These alternative election slates were set up as a stopgap while litigation and legislative review was pending in 7 states, those being Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Georgia, New Mexico, and Nevada. The mainstream media would tell you that Trump lost all of his legal cases. Of course, that is untrue. There were only 2 evidentiary hearings against the myriad lawsuits filed by Trump's supporters. So, in other words, the courts claimed no jurisdiction, or they threw out all of those lawsuits on a technicality. No court ever held that the election was illegal or that it was pristine. It's particularly interesting to me that Ed Martin, the deputy associate, I believe, attorney general, who put out the pardon message as signed by the president, cited very specifically a case in the 1960 election in Hawaii while a Democrat contingent slate of alternative electors was filed, while litigation and a recount were pending. John F. Kennedy claimed that he had won Hawaii, or that he would win it, when all of the absentee ballots were counted, but Vice President Richard Nixon argued that he had won it, and it appeared on election night that was the case. Martin argues in his message supporting the president's pardon that the certificates mirrored this process, certificates used by Republicans in 2020, and that they legitimate placeholders during an unresolved contest was not illegal. We now know that Operation Arctic Frost was the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, a dirty trick in which the full power and the authority of the U.S. government was weaponized to spy on U.S. senators, prominent Republicans, and Trump supporters, including, by the way, yours truly. Will Jack Smith be brought to justice for this entirely fictitious and baseless investigation and effort to spy on and charge people who committed no crime? That remains to be seen, but I do think it is interesting that of all the people who did not get a preemptive pardon from Joe Biden, who pardoned all the members of the January 6th committee as well as pardoning members of his own family, Jack Smith did not receive a pardon. So I'm hopeful that a federal grand jury is sitting in South Florida will examine the seditious conspiracy that began in 2016, went through 2 impeachments, the January 6th fiasco, the documents case, and the charges against President Donald Trump. Until next week, God bless you and Godspeed, and thank you for joining us here on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
If you're looking to create, grow, and sustain your wealth, download and subscribe to the Pain Points of Wealth podcast at BeBullish.com with Bob, Ryan, and Chris Payne. It's your podcast for market insights, money tips, and real talk on the economy.
Download and subscribe
at BeBullish.com.